Well, welcome to another edition of Rotten Reviews, and certainly welcome to a whole lot of rottenness. On this edition, I'm going to take a look at the 2016 film Mechanic Resurrection, not to be confused with the predecessor, the 2011 film called The Mechanic. Neither one of them are good films, but this one is certainly the most rotten, and it's the most recent, and it's what I'm going to be talking about today. But first, just to catch you up to speed, let's take a look at the 2011 film right here. It has a 53% and a 51% on those handy-dandy little rottenness meters there. Now, this was certainly a forgettable film back in 2011 with Jason Statham. I guess it's okay if you're really an action film fan, but it's nothing special. It was very forgettable. In fact, I forgot exactly what happened. It's a remake of a far better film with Charles Bronson and Jan Michael Vincent. This one is just, it's straight up forgettable trash. Now, when we move up to the subject of this edition of Rotten Reviews, the 2016 film, we have a 32% on the tomato meter and a 40% on the audience score, so it's definitely a step down from the 2011 forgettable film. That's why, I'm glad this isn't called The Mechanic Part 2, because it's not really a sequel. There's nothing in this one that connects to the first one. The only similarity is that it has Jason Statham as the title character, and he's an assassin, very much a superhuman type of assassin, and how rotten his performance is and how rotten this film is really depends on the mindset that you have going into it. If you go into this expecting, as the marketing promised, to find an action adventure, a little bit of a mystery, to have a thriller, you're going to come out of this really offended and considering this a piece of trash film. If you went into this, if you saw this particularly on home video release, you were at home, you were relaxed, and you were already well within a six-pack, or maybe even beyond a six-pack, you're into a 12-pack now, then you might actually find this enjoyable as a comedy, as something that it's so bad that it's good to laugh out loud at. But I went into this sober, and I actually looked up the genre listing on this film, and it is not marketed in any way as a comedy or a parody or a satire or as an attempt to make fun of the first one with Jason Statham. It isn't. This one straight up expects you to take it serious, and I'll say that it doesn't do any of its stars justice, and it has a lot of big-name stars in it in very minor and stupid roles. For example, we have Jessica Alba, who has to show up in a bikini. That's basically her whole role in this, and she does a good job, being in a bikini, as she has been in many other movies. She looks the same, and she's just as effective, but unfortunately adds nothing to the plot of this rotten movie. We also have Tommy Lee Jones, that shows up in this film rather late into it, and his character most closely resembled his character in the old Batman films, where he's the Riddler, I believe, and or was he Two-Face? I'm thinking he was actually Two-Face back in those original Batman franchise, that original film. I don't recall if it's Batman Forever or it's Batman. Is it Batman and Robin? I don't even know, and I don't care. But he resembles a character straight up out of one of those films, not to be taken seriously. He spends a lot of the running time in his bathrobe and his pajamas, and they look like bathrobe and pajamas out of a Batman film. It's a Tim Burton Batman film, and it's completely stupid. And then we have Michelle Yeoh, and she's known for a lot of action films in America and in China, and she's been in some fantastic movies, and she was in Star Trek, the new Star Trek series on CBS, the one that's not really that popular right now. In any case, these are actors and actresses that belong in a much better film. I don't know why they showed up in this. It's almost like they were desperate to get paid, or maybe they thought this would be funny, that they were in a comedy, because there's nothing serious to be found here. It's completely ridiculous and dumb on every level. It has things such as pistols with infinite ammo. It has a character that can swim underwater pretty much as fast as a large ship can. It has so much nonsensical stuff, and it starts right from the beginning of the film in the opening scene, and it never becomes logical from any point onward. It just is a whole lot of illogical, completely ridiculous stuff that if you're drunk, or if this had just been executed with a little bit of a better timing and it had had some more comedic writing, it could have worked as a laugh out loud parody of action films. But let's get right into the audience reviews on this. I don't know, let's see what other people have to say, because basically there's not a whole lot to find redeemable here. But let's start off with one from November 29, 2019. 2.5 stars. Jason Statham and Jessica Alba, along with a few guns, cannot resurrect yet another failed sequel attempt. Well, first off, it's not really a sequel. That's probably why it's not called The Mechanic Continues or The Mechanic Part 2. It really isn't. There's nothing in the plot of it that suggests it's a sequel. In fact, you don't even need to watch the first one to understand what's going on here. It wouldn't help you. It certainly would probably only confuse you more if you saw the first one. So just watch this one cold turkey. I mean, you're not going to get a better experience knowing more about better films. But on that 2.5 stars, I disagree. I'm going to give this half a star because a movie was made and people were paid and bank accounts were added to and checks were cashed and etc. And the economy went around a little bit more because of this. But as far as a piece of filmmaking, there's nothing redeemable here. It's like one of those films that a lot of people would probably be justified in trying to find a way to give it 0 stars. It is that bad. Now, it doesn't make me angry, and I don't get all worked up over it like I have on some of my other rotten reviews. It didn't offend me because right away it showed me how bad it was going to be when I saw, a small girl kick the door off kick the steel door off a gondola, for example. And when I saw Jason Statham's character jump on top of a hang glider and just hang glide away to escape the bad guys, that was very quickly, very at the front and center, very quick in the running time of the film. And so it just straight up revealed its hand that it was going to be that kind of film. And that's why I didn't find this offensively bad. And I was able to sit through it just pretty much picking it apart, because there was not a point in this which, there was like maybe for 30 or 40 seconds I took this film seriously. And then it quickly told me not to take it serious. And then I went through the rest of it just wanting to find out how bad it would get, but I never got angry or anything, so that's neither here or there. I'm not going to entertain any star reviews greater than 3 stars because I'm sorry, I'm just not going to believe anybody that gives this higher than 3 stars. So let's move on. We have one from September 4th, 2019, making it, 2 months, 3 months old now. 3 stars. Jason always gives good fight scenes, but the movie as a whole was just okay. I'm going to have to disagree on that. This movie was not okay in any regard. Let's just refer right to my list. I do have a list. Yeah, right from the beginning, right away, the thing that shouldn't cost much of a budget at all in any movie nowadays. It doesn't cost me much of a budget for these videos I'm making. The green screen effect in this film just fails straight up right from the beginning. It's very bad. It's very obvious. It's like so bad and obvious that it could have been considered for comedic effect, but no, there's nothing. This movie is just straight up serious all the way through. But it looks really cheap. You can tell they're indoors. They're supposed to be sitting outdoors in an outdoor cafe in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, but you can tell that they're just sitting in a soundstage and it's a green screen of Rio around them. And it's so bad, so bad that even a low-budget TV production wouldn't try to pass this off as serious, but they do try to pass it off as serious. That was one of my first clues what kind of movie this was going to be, and it got far, far worse as we went on. So it's not even okay. If this were okay, at least, they would have tried to make the green screen background look real in the opening shots, and They didn't even try. I mean, I could have done better in my bedroom, and I have. So let's move on. 1.5 stars, January 18, 2019. Imagine a world where handguns carry 30 bullets in a single clip, where you can shoot forever and never have to reload. That is the world that Arthur Bishop lives in, and boy, does he love it. The Mechanic 2 Resurrection felt a little stale to me. Don't get me wrong, it's basically an action-packed as skydiving, except this movie didn't pack a parachute and it falls hard. I think that action sequences were done great, but there is practically no storyline whatsoever. They try to create a love story. Yeah, this film, that's why I thought it should have been made into a comedy, because part of the plot of this film revolves the mechanic character. He wants to retire. He doesn't want to be known as a killer anymore. He doesn't want anybody to find him. He just wants to retire somewhere quiet. So he has this bungalow somewhere on an island, beach resort in Thailand, and he wants to just disappear to this small bungalow, and he's already got all this set up. The film shows you that he's obviously had this planned for a long time. So he goes to this little island bungalow in Thailand, and right away, he's just gazing out at the ocean from his beach bungalow, and he sees this woman played by Jessica Alba on the deck of this sailboat having a domestic dispute with, her boyfriend, husband, or whoever it is. And it's pretty quick in the plot that we find out that she has just been sent there by the bad guy to fall in love with him so he can rescue her and then fall in love with her. And then because he loves her, the villain will have leverage over him to make him go on 3 different assassination missions. Okay, fine, but it's pretty early on that he encounters Jessica Alba's character, and Jessica Alba straight out admits to him what the whole villain's plan was by sending her there. And yet, what does he do? Does he say, "Oh, thanks for telling me," and then send her on her way? Nope. He actually has sex with her and then falls in love with her, and then actually allows the villain to take her prisoner and do exactly what she said that the villain wanted to do. That's where I was considering that maybe this had been written as a comedy or something. But no, it's completely played seriously, and you're expected to go along with this. And so in the course of just a few minutes in the film, he falls in love with this complete strange girl after he's had sex with her, and he cares about her so much that he gives her his father's precious wristwatch. That's a precious keepsake to this character. He gives it to her, and then she's taken prisoner by the villain on this boat, and then of course he does everything the villain says and follows all of the villain's instructions, because if he doesn't, the villain is going to kill the girl that he just met like less than an hour earlier, but he's in love with her now. And remember, she told him that this was the plan, that she was supposed to do this. And then there's a lot of plot holes that happen in the meantime. I mean, just in the first 20 minutes, let me tell you about some of them. When he meets the girl, he ends up actually killing the character that was playing her abusive husband on the boat. It's later revealed that's not her husband. It's like somebody pretending to be. And he kills this character. So to get rid of the evidence, he tosses gasoline all over the top of this big sailboat, and he burns it, and it explodes in a ball of fire right off the beach, like 100, 200 yards off this tourist beach. And there are tourists there. None of them choose to call the police. Nobody has a problem with this sailboat just 100 or 200 yards offshore just blowing up into a fireball and burning, and I presume it would burn for a while before it sank beneath the water. And nobody calls the police, and just a few minutes later, he's with Jessica Alba, and they go right down the beach. They stroll down the beach to this like little bar, and they party and they dance with all the other tourists. And even though they know, and it's stated that they know they're being watched by the villain's henchmen, they don't care. They just decide to party, and it doesn't even matter. They just party there and hang out until the villain's thugs show up with some paid-off police to take the girl into custody, and this is where the villain starts his villain plan. And it's like this would have worked in a comedy of some sort, like making fun of action films and how stupid the plots often are. But no, this actually has a stupid plot that makes fun of itself, and it just outright shows how stupid it is. And everybody just goes along with it seriously, and there's no comedy, and you're not laughing. And I would imagine that if I had been like 6 beers into a 12 pack, I might have found this something I could laugh at about how stupid it is. But it's just like the timing is off. It's not quite written to be a comedy, and it's just dumb. It's just dumb all the way through. And what I described, all this dumb stuff going on, is just within the first like 15, 20 minutes of the film. Maybe it's not even that far into it, running time wise. And this goes on for 110 minutes. It's nonstop action, like another reviewer pointed out. The action never lets up, but the action is completely dumb. And even the fight scenes, there's not really actually contact being made between Jason Statham's character and the bad guys. He's punching them out and killing them in all these different ways. And much like how the guns never run out of ammunition, unless it's convenient for the plot. A pistol can fire 30, 40, 50 times before it needs to be reloaded with another magazine. And excuse me, the craziness doesn't stop there. I mean, the craziness involves, obviously, in an action film, you need to make it look like Jason Statham is punching bad guys, but it's just obvious that they did this in the cheapest, easiest, laziest ways they could figure out how to do, and then just use tricks of the camera editing and camera angles and back and forth between different edits and cuts to make it look like all this action fighting is going on. And it's so obvious and so badly done that you're just wondering if, again, somebody didn't consider this to be a comedy, or they weren't trying to make fun of action films. But there's no laugh to be found. Again, they're playing this completely seriously, and I didn't know what to think. I'm jotting all these notes down about how dumb all this is, and at a certain point, about 30 minutes into this, I just gave up making notes about all the dumb stuff going on because it became overwhelming. It's like you would have to pause this film hundreds of times just to jot down all the problems, the plot holes, the silliness, the illogical stuff going on. It's just over the top. At a certain point, you just throw up your hands and say, hey, I'm just going to watch this to find out just how dumb it gets. And oh boy, does the final act of this movie, if that's what you want to call it, get completely laugh out loud dumb in the logic department. I mean, it goes into 8-year-old action movie, like an 8-year-old could have written this script at the end, and how this actually ends up, but we'll get there. Let's move on. Before I talk my voice into cracking again. Half a star, January 1, 2019. This is just from, within this week. This review here is just not a good movie. Well, yeah, that's an understatement. Looking for a little bit more detail on that. Here's one from November 24, 2018. So we've jumped back 1 year and a month or so just on the front page of these audience reviews, so that's probably a bad sign. For most movies it would be. 1 star. The movie opened with a hilariously cheesy stunt that got an unintentional belly laugh from me. The rest of the movie I was just waiting for it to be over. No chemistry between Alba and Statham. All the effects looked really cheap and stood out like a sore thumb. Plot holes everywhere. For an action movie to work, you gotta have some measurable amount of tension. This movie had none. Statham's character executes everything perfectly and never has any hiccups or faults. Waste of time. Yeah, watching Jason Statham do this and, set up these 3 assassinations he has to conduct is like watching some kind of how-to video, just going through the numbers, and it's all carried out flawlessly for example purposes, like a training video. And it looks like a giant training video for action movies, like how everything logically works. But yeah, Statham's character, he never has any problems. There's never any hint that he'll ever fail. He never gets scratched. He always just does everything, executes everything flawlessly and perfectly no matter what happens. And even the bad guys, conveniently, when the movie actually shows something about to happen that could foil Statham's plan, the movie conveniently just hand waves it away and has villains and their henchmen doing illogical things, like not hearing things that they would obviously obviously here, and just turning their backs at just the perfect moments for him to get away with doing what he's doing. Everything is like this in this movie. It's like a gigantic how-to training video for assassins with everything set up perfectly just for demonstration purposes, and that's what it feels like, a big demonstration of an action movie, not an actual action movie. Like, you don't care about anything that's happening. Like I said, you throw up your hands after a certain amount of running time and just want to sit through this to find out just how dumb it's going to get. Tension, no tension whatsoever. Yet this isn't a comedy. It's not supposed to be making fun of anything. It's just a complete fail. The director, whoever he is or she is, it's a complete embarrassment. I hope they laid low for a while after this one. 3.5 stars. I'm not even going to read it. 1 star, November 4, 2018. Mechanic Resurrection is a disappointing film. It is about Bishop, who thought he had put his murders past behind him until his girlfriend is kidnapped. Even saying she's his girlfriend is like, yeah, she became his girlfriend in like just a few minutes. But okay, let's continue. Jason Statham and Jessica Alba give horrible performances. The screenplay is badly written. Dennis Gansel did a terrible job directing this movie. I was not impressed with this motion picture. I've never heard of that director, and there's probably a reason for that. I hope this was the only thing he directed, because that's an embarrassment. It's like, if this had been my movie, I think I would have had to have moved into another line of work. Maybe I would have become a film reviewer or something, because this is really shamefully embarrassing. 1.5 stars, October 1, 2018. One reviewer sums it up well. Another generic Jason Statham action movie with cheap violence, poor performances, and a waste of your time. When you have loads of takes from Brazil, Thailand, and Jessica Alba looking pretty, you know that they did not invest heavily in the story. One more resurrection like this and Jason will become the next Steven Seagal. Yeah, well, unfortunately, that might already be happening, because Jason Statham, now I haven't seen the actual Hobbs and Shaw movie, which is kind of based on characters from Fast and Furious. But even as, you know, Jason Statham showed up in Fast and Furious and that franchise, it began to look like he's going downhill. And he's been in other rotten movies. For example, he was in one I reviewed, just in a very minor role, and that was rotten, and that was early in his career. But he's been in an increasing number of rotten ones now that are almost irredeemable, and I think he's only survived because those films, they've been forgotten about very quickly. This one's pretty much been forgotten about by the look of these audience reviews and how far back in time we are already. That's the only thing that he might have a shot of saving his career, is that people are just going to forget about these really bad movies he's in, because yeah, just 1 or 2 more of these, he hits one that's not real forgettable, and his career is finished. He will, yes, he will become like Steven Seagal. Worse than that, because Jason Statham is still, his name is still so recognizable that, you know, even Steven Seagal has a better chance of resurrecting himself than Jason Statham will if he continues like this. Yeah, it's not good. It's really disappointing. When you look back at the Transporter movies, you know, the Transporter is what really put him out there on the map, so to speak, and Transporter 3, I forgot about everything that happens in that film, and that was probably my first clue that he's not so great. But anyway, moving on. 1 star, July 18, 2018. This movie is pretty bad. Bad acting. The makeup for wounds was horrible. Looks so fake I had to rewind and look at it again just to laugh. Yeah, you might want to, if you've got this on DVR, or you actually somehow, well, my condolences if you've actually purchased this in some way. But if this is in your movie collection, you have the physical media, yeah, get hammered and watch this. Maybe this is worth watching when you're totally blitzed, just to watch something so cringeworthy bad. I have the bad feeling, though, that it wouldn't be that funny. It's just not quite written right to be funny, even, you know, accidentally. Let's look at my list. Yeah, I mentioned jumping on the hang glider, the girl, the tiny girl that kicked the big old steel door right off a gondola, like she had superpowers. That was at the very beginning of the film. Yeah, tourists, they don't call the police when a big, you know, rather expensive multi-million-dollar sailboat just blows up right off the shore. They don't bother to even report that to the police, and the police don't care either. Um, yeah, it's like the blackmail plot. The villain's blackmail plot doesn't work because not only does Jessica Alba explain the whole thing to Statham at the beginning, but he just goes along with it. Yeah, I just can't get over that. I had to rewind that scene a couple of times to find out if there was something I missed when she just explained everything and he still went along with it. I thought I missed something the first time. I didn't, though. Yeah, there's no reason for him to give a shit about her, but he has to do all this stuff for her. And he gives his dad's priceless watch to her for whatever reason. Yeah. Anyway, oh yeah, there's a scene where he has to break into a prison in Malaysia. It's on this island in Malaysia, and there's this terrorist arms dealer in there he has to assassinate. And he gets into it just by, he spends about 5 minutes making a fake passport, and the police believe that's a real passport. I guess that's kind of believable if you do a good enough job. They're not looking too close at it. But remember, when he assaults a police officer so that he'll be arrested and taken to this island prison. But the movie shows it as, well, basically he just forges a passport, puts it in his back pocket, then assaults a police officer on the street, and then all of a sudden he's taken to this gigantic prison, that's obviously not meant for people that just had drunken fights on the street. It's meant for real criminals, serious ones. And he's taken to this island prison. And never mind that they would have actually looked at his passport to find out. They would have put it in the computer to find out if it was real or not. But nope, they believed it just from that one fake passport that he's this wanted criminal. And so they take him to this maximum security prison on this island. And then when he gets to the part where they're going to take his personal possessions, he's in this big line of prisoners. The whole thing is ridiculous and cheesy, and it's an 8-year-old's version of how this would work. The prison guard takes his personal possessions, like his chewing gum and his cigarettes, and actually gives them back to him. Like, he's allowed to keep his personal possessions, and he's allowed to just walk into the prison with the stuff in his pocket from the street that he had when he was just arrested a few minutes prior. It makes absolutely no sense, and I might laugh about it right now about how stupid it is, but when I was watching this, it just wasn't funny, and it doesn't strike me as something that's written in a way that you'll laugh even if you're drunk. It's just too dumb, and it happens so quickly, you're just wondering, how is this all happening? And then, of course, being the master assassin that he is, the chewing gum that's in his pocket that's returned to him along with his cigarettes, they're not real. The chewing gum is actually plastic explosives disguised as chewing gum. And the cigarettes have some, it has a tracking device hidden in one of the cigarettes, for example, that he has to swallow so that after he kills this prisoner, he will be able to be picked up by a boat offshore from the island. The whole thing is ridiculous. Every aspect of this, every aspect of everything that happens in the plot is like an 8-year-old wrote it. It has that kind of logic, and it's supposed to be taken 100% seriously. I have so much stuff on this list, and it would take me like an hour just to list off all the fails of this thing about how bad the script is, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to go through more rotten reviews. July 18, 2018, 1 star. This movie is pretty bad. Okay, I read that one. 1 star, July 11th, 2018. The action is predictable. Alba is awful. The relationship buildup was sophomoric, and Statham mumbled his way through the lines as though he was embarrassed to speak them. I had also never seen a movie that was able to underutilize Tommy Lee Jones, but now I have. The only reason I'm giving it even 1 star is because I needed to kill 98 minutes, and this movie did that for me. Well, yeah, congratulations. You killed 98 minutes, and then you still had a few more minutes left over. Congratulations, because the movie is 110 minutes. What did you do with all that extra time? In any case, yeah, Tommy Lee Jones, he doesn't show up until like near the very end of the film, and he looks like something out of his role in a Batman movie. And he's an arms dealer. Now listen to this type of 8-year-old villain logic. He's a big bad arms dealer who is an American, who has a secret base on the shores of the Black Sea in Bulgaria, and he has submarines in this underground base on the shore of the Black Sea, and these submarines are said to have ICBMs, and he's surrounded by henchmen that speak Russian. And yeah, that's all believable. He's like a Bond villain. Now, when you see his submarines that supposedly have ballistic missiles, ICBMs, in his underground cavern, they're like small, old Russian subs that probably barely had torpedoes on them. They certainly couldn't be large enough to have ICBMs and etc. But they're like props of old, really old Russian subs from like the 50s or something. And the the whole thing is ridiculous. It's like an 8-year-old tried to rip off a scene from the 1977 or 78 film The Spy Who Loved Me, where that villain had like these subs in like a similar situation, and it's really bad. It's like an 8-year-old did everything in this film, and it's just not funny. I wish it was. When I saw all the crazy stuff going on, and you know how he sneaks into the base, he actually he uses a sniper rifle to shoot one of the guard on. There's a guard patrolling the roof of this base that has an underground sub cavern underneath it, and to get into it, he uses a sniper rifle from some other faraway building or something in the city, and he shoots the leg out of the guard that's on the roof of this building on top of this base. And then when the guard falls down and the other guards go to the roof to like put pressure on the wound, they call for some kind of ambulance, and an ambulance helicopter shows up, presumably from some hospital in the nearby city, and Jason Statham's character is disguised as one of the paramedics on the rescue chopper, and then he infiltrates the base through the roof while the other bad guys, the other guards, the henchmen of this arms dealer, they are applying pressure to the wound of the guy on the roof, but they never once ask like who shot him or what's going on or raise any kind of alarms. It's like an 8-year-old wrote this entire script, really. Whoever the director is, maybe he put his 8-year-old son onto the script. Maybe that's who wrote it. I don't know. That's the only thing I can kind of try to think up of how this happened. It's that bad. 2 stars. I gained cancer from this. I'm sorry, my condolences on that one. June 16, 2018, 1 star. Mechanic Resurrection is the sequel to the 2011 flick starring Jason Statham. In this one, he falls in love with Jessica Alba after spending 2 days together on the beach in Thailand till his nemesis kidnaps his 2-day-old girlfriend and has to do 3 assassinations to save his love. Okay, so the storyline was weak, the action was quirky and not crisp. I didn't like it at all. I kept thinking, Jason, you could have done much better. What a fucking mess. Great cast, but overall the flick was awful. They're giving it 1 star and they're like not saying positive things about this film, but the way they're doing it is actually giving this film too much credit. It really is. Let's move on. 2 stars, April 6, 2018. Poor acting and storyline, and I felt myself saying, what's the point throughout. February 25, 2018. 2 stars, nice action, flat, straightforward plot. Bishop succeeds in every unrealistic stunt. Tommy Lee Jones lighted up the movie, though. It's like they're telling you it's no good, but they're also telling you that there's something redeemable about it, and I'm sorry, there's just nothing redeemable about this. It's not funny enough to be redeemable. Half a star, February 23rd, 2018. Really bad. I couldn't stop cringing. It was that bad. Felt compelled to write a review. Yeah, I didn't cringe because, like I said, so early on it showed me what kind of film it was going to be, how bad it was going to be, that there was nothing left to cringe at. There was nothing left to get mad at. I just decided to watch all the way to the end to find out just how dumb it would get. It did not disappoint in that regard, but there was nothing to laugh at. 1.5 stars, January 21, 2018. Saying the writing is cheesy and cliche would be an insult to cheese and cliches. Yes, I agree. The acting is phoned in and seems like those acting weren't very invested themselves. The first was a bit more serious and well established, while this one seems rushed and boring. Few good fight scenes. The previous was way better. Well, yeah, the previous has to be way better, but the previous is certainly also rotten and forgettable. There's no question about that. I don't even remember what the hell happened in in it, and I'm sure it's going to be the subject of a rotten review one of these days. Yeah, but I'll agree with this reviewer. Saying that this is just cheesy and cliche is actually giving this movie too much credit. It's that bad. It's really that bad. Rushed and boring? No, it's got a pace that's just like an action movie pace that doesn't let up. It just keeps on going, keeps on trucking with the action, but it's action that you're just watching a bunch of action, and it's not exciting. It's just dumb. You don't feel like there's any suspense or anything to care about. And I'll say that, yeah, it has all these actors that are big name actors that are capable of doing all these great things in other films, but they're completely wasted. Like Michelle Yeoh's character, she was just a lady that ran a beach resort somewhere in Thailand, and she had very few lines. And what was the point? Like, maybe they needed to film in that location and she happened to be vacationing there at the time, so she just was pulled in at the last minute. I mean, because they put these big actors and actresses into roles that are so tiny and worthless that I'm just wondering how they ended up there. It's like, were they blackmailed into this, or were they just happening to be vacationing at the right spots where this thing happened to be filming? I don't know. It's really weird. Kind of a waste of all these people that are capable of such great performances and other things. 1.5 stars, December 25, 2017. So Christmas from 2 years ago. Corny plot. Was that Bono or Tommy Lee Jones? Only semi-okay part was Jason Statham's fighting, especially when getting shot by a harpoon gun in the hammy doesn't faze him. Yeah, the action scenes, he gets shot by a harpoon gun, and then he just kind of pulls it out and keeps fighting and just shrugs it off. There's a part where he's swimming underwater to catch up. He's swimming underwater at the same speed this gigantic yacht is moving along at pretty much full speed, and he's swimming underneath it and catches up to it underwater, and he's holding his breath the whole time. And yeah, I didn't know he was Aquaman, but at one part of this, he's Aquaman and has Aquaman's powers. And the fighting, it's obviously they're using a lot of camera editing tricks to make it look like they're having these action fights, but really there's not a whole lot of fighting going on. There's a lot of guns firing and blazing away, and bullets firing and machine guns firing thousands of rounds. It would be something like out of an 80s Schwarzenegger or a 1980s Stallone action movie, really dumb like that, except those movies were funny and had deliberate one-liner comedy, and they were memorable, and some of them have become cult classics, whereas this, it's completely boring, unoriginal, and even the action scenes don't work. They're not effective. So anybody that wants to compare this to some kind of cult classic from the 80s, I'm sorry, that's not what this was intended to be. And even if it was, it's a complete fail. It's not up to even the cheesiest of Stallone or Schwarzenegger's movies. And I've heard somebody out there, I won't name them, actually say that that was the intention of this film. I'm sorry, it wasn't. You're very much mistaken. It's like you didn't actually watch this whole thing, or maybe you were impaired when you watched it, because this does not even live up to the worst of the action cheese from the 1980s. I was there. I ought to know. 2 stars, December 11, 2017. The stunts and special effects aren't good enough to make up for how dumb the story is. 3 stars. Wow, 3 stars. I have to read this one. November 24, 2017. I swear you can always tell when males do the editing for a film, as Patton Oswalt said, because it loses your attention span at certain parts. Sure enough, when I looked it up on IMDb, edited by 3 guys, go figure, probably would have been great otherwise. Great actors, great script, great concept, but bad editing. Part with the pool was awesome. Wow, I don't know what movie they're talking about. Actually, everything he says is wrong. It's like he's watching a completely different action movie, and I'm going to judge that he was. He wasn't watching this movie. Maybe he put that review on the wrong film. October 19, 2017, 1 star. The original Mechanic with Charles Bronson is a classic. As for the remake, the first one was okay, not great, but okay. This one, on the other hand, sucked. Yeah, that's short and sweet, and I'll agree, but 1 star is too much. This is half a star. Let's see, what else can I find off my list? Yep. The prison scene is ridiculous. The prison scene, you know, he kills this guy. It takes him like 2 or 3 whole minutes to make friends and kill this guy in prison who's got all these henchmen surrounding him in this prison. He's effectively running the prison from the inside. Yet Statham's character just makes friends with him and kills him off and avoids all his henchmen just because he's so awesome, and the henchmen just don't hear anything while all this fighting's going on a few feet away from him through an open door and open windows, no less. And then Statham uses like C4 or Semtex that's disguised as chewing gum and uses that to blow a hole through the prison wall, and then dives off the cliff at the end, kind of like Halle Berry escaped in her role in Die Another Day, escaped from the island by jumping off the big cliff into the water. Completely stupid. A lot of the stuff was ripped off from a whole bunch of movies. Like some of it was ripped off from James Bond movies. Some of it's ripped off from Fast and Furious. Some of it's ripped off from a lot of other movies, but it's like it was all ripped off by an 8-year-old who saw those films and wrote his version of all this bullshit. It's like an 8-year-old's version of all these type of things stolen from other movies. Tommy Lee Jones, his character is called Max Adams. Yeah, that's his name, Max Adams. He's got subs in an underground cavern on the Black Sea with ICBMs. Of course, the subs don't even have the size to hold ICBMs or even have hatches for the ICBMs to come out of, but you're supposed to ignore all that because an 8-year-old put the sets together too. Yeah, they kind of set it up to have a third movie. At the end, of course, Jason Statham's mechanic character, he manages to convince everybody in the world that he's dead, but of course it's shown that he's not, and it kind of sets it up to have a third movie. And really, please stop. I hope there isn't a third movie, or if they do a third one, please make it into a straight-up comedy. Don't pretend it's something else, and write it for comedy and get me to laugh at it. That would be awesome. Yeah, this was marketed as a straight-up serious film. I saw the marketing just to make sure I wasn't mistaken. So if anybody out there, there is at least one reviewer out there trying to convince people this was meant to be funny. It's not. If you try that, if you try to go that route enjoying this, my recommendation is go into this with a 12-pack. You're going to need it, and get 6 beers into it. Otherwise, you're not going to laugh much at this. Just get totally blitzed. That's the only way, I think, in my opinion, that you're going to enjoy this. Again, it's a long shot. You know, this only has 25,586 audience reviews. That means this is largely forgotten about for such a recent film with such a big name and with such other big names in it. So that tells you something. This is completely rotten. 40% on the audience score. That should be single digits. It really should. And it should be single digit score on the tomato meter. I don't know how the critics even gave this 32%. So I just got to get out of here before I get traumatized and my voice cracks up thinking about or talking about this thing anymore. And I will see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.